Alongside Aaron Ward and Shane Kelly, I'm Irfaan Gaffar here with the fourth period, and we like to call this segment Dirty Data. Gentlemen, let's do the West Coast edition of this segment. And Aaron, I'll start with you. The Colorado Avalanche, can they repeat?
Absolutely. It's not to say they won't have a little bit of that Stanley Cup hangover that every team seems to be afflicted by at some stage of the season. But you look at this team in the offseason moves, I actually think they got better. Georgiev, for me, I'm a big fan of his. I think it's an upgrade in net. Their D-core, not a whole lot to say. They have the most dynamic defenseman in the National Hockey League. And the D-core as a whole, I think top two, comparable to maybe the Carolina Hurricanes. They're solid top to bottom. Up front, I believe there was a lot of questions, obviously, with the departure of Kadri. People are going to say, well, what are they going to do with that? Truth is, they played the majority of the playoffs testing that. I mean, this is a guy that got injured, and they had to fill these gaps, and they had guys step up. So the likes of Lehkonen being up on the top line right now is because he earned it over the course of the playoffs. I'm a buyer. I'm a believer in the fact that the Colorado Avalanche can repeat. I think they're just going to absolutely dominate the West again this year. Maybe some mental errors over the course of the season, but that's to be expected because it's been a very short off season for them.
You're really going out on a limb with that one, eh? Most of the public models have them kind of between 20 and 30% chance of repeating at the start of the season. To your point, Wardo, I mean, they added guys like Evan Rodriguez on a pretty good contract. I don't love the Nikushkin deal, but he's a guy who showed he can play with that group. On the back end, getting Girard back, by advanced stats, he profiles as one of the better puck-moving offensive defensemen in the league. And that McCarr-Taves pairing, I mean, last night it was the Chicago Blackhawks, but I think they put in one of the most complete performances by a D pairing that we've seen in, you know, the so-called analytics era. So other than, I think there's a lot more questions on the back end, or in goal than you do, but other than that, I really can't find a weakness with this group.
Hey, Shane, I might not be going on a limb, but I have to checklist at least one of the 32 teams that they're not going to come back to us and say, we hate your team.
Absolutely.
Guys, Aaron, I just want to ask you very quickly, just continuing with the Colorado Avalanche. You know, when we talked about the Tampa Bay Lightning and about so much of their offense comes from their defense, is this what we're going to see for the next few years from the Colorado Avalanche?
Well, if I'm a forward, I love what I have structurally back there. That as an opponent, I always have to account for the second wave of offense. And it's not just McCarr. Like that's a solid group that can add to a second layer. So I find that I have more space because the back check always has to slow up looking and identifying who's coming next. So, again, for Jared Bednar, this is like a wealth of talent that every day I get to come to the rink and toy with and decide I can maybe play with the opponent because there's so many opportunities and abilities that are present in that locker room.
Shane, the Calgary Flames had one of the biggest facelifts of the offseason, and the players that they got rid of and the players that they acquired. From the outset looking in, how much different is that team going to be?
I don't know that they'll be too different when it comes to where they're going to end up in the standings. I mean, a hat tip to that front office. When you look at what they were able to do with the hand that they were dealt, if you want to quibble, the only thing you could say really is they did get a fair bit older. And I think that the window for this group is the next couple of years. I mean, you look at the Uyghur deal. I think that they really did well on the AAV there, but you know the back end of that in terms of term is going to get ugly. Same thing with Kadri. These are both kind of right around 30-year-old players who we know they start to decline post 30. Now, obviously, they're coming from a really high performance level, but that's Father Time is undefeated. So for the next couple seasons, I think this is a group that's going to contend behind the Avalanche for that kind of number 2 spot in the West. But again, the window, I think there's an expiration date to this group.
If they gave out an award for GM of the preseason, given where Calgary was in free agency, Tree Living's got it. I mean, the idea that he's lost what he has and in one area integrated. You mentioned Uyghur's contract. I love the fact that it's just a much deeper team right now. Like, this guy provides a level of offense. So where we thought, like, oh, the departure of Gaudreau, where are they going to replace that? Well, it's going to be a different look. I'm not sold clearly on Kadri being the same agitator or irritant as Tkachuk is out there, but he possesses those abilities. He's a motivated guy. He's going to a city where he's being welcomed and wanted currently. And for Huberdeau, again, a ton of talent. He proved it in Florida. So I don't think they necessarily took a step back. They just kind of they changed the face of this team. And I believe Calgary in the West, for me, after Colorado, is number 2. I think this is a very talented team that's going to make some serious noise in the West.
All right, Aaron, final one here. As we head into the regular season, which teams do you think may or may not meet expectations come playoff time?
So I'm going to go with the 2 teams that started the season against each other out west, and that's the LA Kings and the Vegas Golden Knights. For me, Vegas, I'm not buying them right now. Massive gap, massive hole in net currently. In light of the fact Lehner is out for the season, I don't know how they're going to fill that void. And I think there's so much changeover over the course of the summer and so many questions that still exist. I mean, listen, brand new coach in Cassidy. There's a philosophy change there that has to be absorbed by the team. Pacioretty, who's a major presence, is gone now, gone to Carolina. They do get Stone back. Eichel's in there, but again, until I'm shown different, until you see that the guy physically endures an entire season, and it's not a slight to the guy, it's just a fact. It's a long, arduous process of playing an NHL season. I believe he's talented, but I got to see this happen. So for me, the Vegas Golden Knights are definitely not a shoo-in to make the playoffs. The team that I'm looking to see make noise, more noise than they did last year, the LA Kings. I think they proved a lot to themselves in making the playoffs last year and standing with the Edmonton Oilers. They actually had the Edmonton Oilers in fits at times. What I like about LA, quick in net, Doughty back healthy, hopefully for the course of the season. But up front, this is a team that was built on 4-line production, parity in that production. And the addition of Fiala, I think, just makes them more potent. It's a very young team. I think they, again, youth sometimes has naivety of playing games. They don't read who they're playing against. They don't care who they're playing against. They come in, they play their style. So for me, the LA Kings are the team that I think are going to make some surprising noise come playoff time.
As far as teams that I don't think are going to meet expectations, I'll give you 2. First one, the Canucks. Quinn Hughes is an incredible player, but the rest of that back end might not look out of place in the AHL, so that's a huge question mark, and Demko is going to be incredibly busy all season. And the Stars. Ottinger, to me, looks like a small sample size darling. There's been questions about him. Gets really hot in the playoffs, gets a new contract. I don't know that you can count on that. And Ben and Seguin are heading into the decline phases of their career. Again, that doesn't mean that you're going to turn into a terrible player overnight. They've both been superstars in this league, but you have to start asking questions, and that's the core for the Stars. And then the other team that I think will exceed expectations, Wardo already stole from me, and that's the LA Kings. I love the addition of Fiala there. Him and Kempe on a line together were 2 of the highest volume shooters in the league last year, and that's a really effective way to drive offense without needing a superstar to create it for you, is to just take a ton of shots. So I think that'll work out for them really well. To me, the big question there, and it's going to determine how they go all season, is what's Byfield going to turn into? Will he start playing like a number 2 overall pick and lengthen that lineup, or is he going to struggle? If he can play like he was drafted, or the spot where he was drafted, they can challenge the second group of contenders underneath the Avs.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for this. Great stuff as always. Join us next week for our segment here on the 4th period called Dirty Data, also known as Why Shane Kelly Hates Your Team.